It's my pleasure to welcome you to an informational meeting about the first ever request for proposals that the Illinois Regenerative Ag Initiative is offering through gracious support from Fresh Taste. So my name is Emily Heaton. I'll introduce myself more in just a minute, but I'm the director of the Illinois Regenerative Ag Initiative, and it's my pleasure to be joined today by Anya Knecht, our associate director, who's going to take us away.
Thanks, Emily. Welcome, everyone. And like Emily said, thank you for giving us your time and attention on this Friday afternoon. As Emily mentioned, I am the Associate Director for IRAI and a Program Manager at the Institute for Sustainability, Energy, and Environment. I also own and operate a small farm outside of Champaign, Urbana. And our team is made up of a couple of other essential members. So Emily, if you could introduce the team.
So just a little bit of an overview of our team. You've met Anya and myself now. We're very lucky to be advised by an internal advisory board at this point. Kim Kidwell, Professor of Crop Sciences and Dean of the College of Ag and Life Sciences, Ag, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences at Illinois. Madhu Khanna, the ACES Endowed Professor in Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics, who's also the interim director of the Institute for Sustainability, Energy, and Environment at the University of Illinois. Adam Davis, who's professor and head of the Crop Sciences Department in Illinois, and Evan DeLucia, the Ahrens Professor of Plant Biology at the university.
So we'll jump right in here to the overview. If you weren't here or able to attend the first meeting or are just hearing about us now, just a brief overview of who we are. The aim of IRAI is to bring all of you together. So UIUC faculty and students, researchers, farmers, educators, community stakeholders, industry partners, and this is so that we can make progress to achieving regenerative agricultural outcomes. And so let's just jump right in here about what regenerative agriculture is. So broadly, it's an outcome-based approach to achieve improvements in soil quality, biodiversity, food security, and community and environmental health. And so we are asking you to tell us how you define RA and what that means to you in terms of your proposals, your projects. And by defining those metrics and what that means in achieving regenerative agriculture, you could be making a big splash or waves in an ocean. And so we kind of like to pull up a graph here, kind of expressing this. The main aim is to have an impact on these key metrics, and those are the metrics that you're defining through some of these proposals. And so there's a lot of ways to win here. Some approaches might have modest changes across large scales, for example, increasing cover crops on corn or soybean acres, or an overall high impact. Some approaches are big changes over small scales and also have a big impact. And still other approaches might be transformative, making really big changes across really big scales to have, very large impact. But regardless, achieving regenerative agriculture is a really broad scope. And so we'd like to see how you plan to make that happen and prioritize those goals in your projects, which leads us to the request for proposals. Emily, could you tell us a little bit about the request?
Love to, Anya. So first, I'd just like to again acknowledge the support that we're receiving for this work from Fresh Taste, who made this possible. And the purpose of the next segment of this meeting this afternoon is just to walk through the request for proposals that we put on our website last week. And so there's a few sections here that I'm just going to walk through to make sure that we're all on the same page about what is written on the RFP document. And then we'll have a chance in the breakout rooms, and we'll show you other ways that you can reach us with your questions. So first of all, let's just talk through the RFP together. So the purpose of the RFP is to help us achieve the goals of the Regenerative Ag Initiative in Illinois. And those are, as Anya said, to build capacity. So we'll be looking for proposals that talk about actionable research and training of the next generation of practitioners, and or building relationships, connecting the stakeholder community with the academic community. How can the University of Illinois show up for our stakeholder community, and how can we make sure that our stakeholder community is taking advantage of the resources and the knowledge that the university can provide? We'll be looking to do those things as well as to help overcome challenges we see with adoption of regenerative ag approaches. What can we do to not only propose new things, but make sure they happen? And of course, to do this in a meaningful way, we're looking for projects that seem like they're going to have a long-term impact. At the initiative, we plan to work hard to make sure we have sustained financial support for activities like funding work this RFP is going to fund. But we also want to make sure that the projects we fund have opportunity to keep going beyond the duration of the projects that we can support. So how can you make sure that your project is meeting these goals? How can you make sure your project is appropriate for this RFP? Well, I just want to double down on what Anya said about thinking through the metrics that you will assess in your project. How will you assess impact in your project? And so one way to do that is just to tell us where you feel like your project would fit on this graph. You can say things like, I envision at the end of this project will have achieved this kind of change in metrics X over this kind of time or space scale, like this many acres, this many people. So just tell us what you envision from your project and how you envision the impact, how those waves might roll beyond the scope of your project. How much money is there? We have $150,000 that we plan to award in this funding cycle. And we are planning to do that in awards of up to $50,000 over a 12 to 24 month period. So, or projects that are 12 to 24 months. So we recognize that that's a fairly short timeline for a lot of projects. And because of that, we recognize that many of the proposals we see might be carve-outs of bodies of work that are maybe a larger or part of a larger body of work that you or your team have been undertaking. So that's completely fine. We are happy to add value to a piece of your work that you'd like to advance through an initiative funded project. We expect that we will be able to have cash in hand to our awardees on September 1st of 2021. And we anticipate making 3 to 5 awards depending on the size of budgets that we get. So of course, if people are asking for less than $50,000, we'll make more awards and vice versa. Importantly, deadlines. The proposals are due Wednesday, June 30th to make sure we have time for that review process and have cash in hand in September. This round, we're trying this two-step process that Anya and I feel like we can handle comfortably. So what we'd like you to do, as detailed in the RFP at go.illinois.edu/IRAI, we'd like you to compile all the pieces of your proposal into a PDF and email it to Anya with IRAI proposal submission in the subject line. And then we want you to complete a Google form telling us that you did that. So the Google form will be your instant feedback to let you know that we know you submitted a proposal, and we'll be looking for that in the email. Just a little bit of redundancy in our system to make sure you quickly know that your proposal has been submitted, and to make sure that we have backup in case email has some issues. All right, evaluation criteria, or sorry, who's eligible? Sorry. Next up is who's eligible. And this is one of the things that we're pretty happy about with the initiative, that we're trying to really put together those communities at UIUC and the stakeholders. So we'd like the teams to be composed of at least one member from each of those communities. So you have to have one person from the University of Illinois and one stakeholder. You could have many more. How do we think about who's a UIUC person? We think of that broadly. But at this point, students and postdocs are not allowed to submit on their own. They need to submit with a faculty or staff member. And although we are excited to have members of the UIC community broadly involved in these proposals, it is an aim of ours to make sure we're specifically getting the research community more involved in regenerative ag. So we will be kind of looking for those things. Similarly, with the stakeholder community, we're going to think really broad on that. So certainly farms and agribusiness are stakeholders in a traditional sense for us, but we are also open to other types of stakeholders. There's lots of people who have skin in the game when it comes to agriculture. So maybe it's a banker, maybe it's a hospital practitioner, maybe a faith organization. All of those, as long as you tell us how your stakeholders are involved in RA, it's appropriate. Okay, so now the evaluation criteria. I'm just going to list these. They are in the RFP, but we'll be looking for quality of the proposed work, clearly articulating how you see it advancing the initiative goals, how you're going to measure, what you're going to measure, and how it's appropriate for regenerative ag. Similarly, with those metrics, what is the expected impact of monitoring those things? What's the expected impact of your proposed work? We'll be looking at your team. You know, do you have the mix of stakeholders and university people on board? How likely is this team to exist beyond the short period that we can fund in the initiative funding here? And then the likelihood that we see for your project to increase regenerative agriculture awareness within and beyond our agricultural community, recognizing that only about 3% of the population actively works in production agriculture, even in a state like Illinois. So the format of, here we go. The format of the proposal, those will be a simple cover page with a short summary, a 3-page narrative. So these are short proposals. We give you 2 pages to describe your team because we are really excited to see who you are and what you bring. 2-page max CV for each person. So again, more place for you to describe who you are and what you bring to this project. And then a simple budget. We have a template on the website. Important notes about the budget is there is no overhead funding allowed for this project, for these projects. And we recognize that depending on the lead entity of your project, funding mechanisms might be different for different entities. So disbursement arrangements will be arranged upon award selection. We are here to support you as you develop this. This is our first time with this request for proposals, so it's our first time seeing it and your first time writing one. So if you have questions, there's going to be a mechanism for seeing answers to everybody's questions on our website. So in this meeting, we're going to be soliciting questions from you. We will use that to design a frequently asked questions sheet, and we will be posting that on our website after this meeting. If your questions are still lingering, then you can reach out to Anya and I via email at RFP in the subject line to get our attention. And then we will do our best to help you find a partner if you'd like us to. One thing we'd like to do is we'd like to share the contact information from this meeting with all the meeting participants. So not sharing it outside this meeting, but sharing just among these attendees. So please let us know in the chat, through email, if you do not want your name and email shared with the other people at this meeting today. So that hopefully gave you an overview of the request for proposals, what to expect. It's all at go.illinois.edu/IRAI. And so now we're going to move into the part of the meeting that covers hopefully feedback from you. So we want to hear what you're thinking about and give you a chance to meet each other. So Anya, can you tell us what's going to happen next?
Yep, thanks, Emily. So next we're going to go into our breakout sessions, and there will be 2 rounds. So each are going to be about 15 minutes. And we're going to ask everyone to participate by accessing the Google document, which is going into the chat right now. And what we'll have you do first is assign a note taker and then give about a 1-minute introduction to kind of outline what your interest is in the Regenerative Agricultural Initiative, and then also yourself. And after that, we'd like you to, kind of record and write down comments about the questions that you have about the initiative or the request for proposals. And all that's going to filter back into things that we address in the wrap-up session, as well as on the website. And so if everyone could try to access the Google document now, and then let us know if you have any trouble with that, so we can get you access.
All right, so welcome back. From our observations of the Google Doc, it seemed like there's a lot of activity happening. I have tried to pull out a few of the themes that I wanted to address before we break for today. So I just put a list here that we saw some questions around clarity of the definitions of regenerative agriculture, as well as who can be involved in the partners. And so I just wanted to quickly touch on those. As far as the definitions of regenerative agriculture and what counts versus what doesn't count, for example, we saw a question of does terminating a cover crop with an herbicide really count as regenerative, for example. We are going to be looking for you to tell us in the proposal why the metrics and the activities you're pursuing matter in terms of regenerative agriculture. We don't want to constrain your ideas in any way. That is not the point of this call for proposals. But we do expect you to tell us why you think it's important and why you think it is regenerative. And so we'll be looking for that clearly defined as best you can. Who can be involved? There's some things that are hard rules and some things that are not hard rules. Things that are hard rules is that there has to be a lead member from the university. There has to be someone involved from the University of Illinois that's faculty or staff. That's a hard line. The whole point of this initiative is to connect the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign community better, more broadly among stakeholders. Now, who within the university, we have no restrictions on that. They just need to be faculty and staff. And if you want to, faculty or staff, and if you want to have students or postdocs, super. If you want to have people from other universities, super. You just need to make sure that you have one person from the university that's faculty or staff. How to find a partner. This is something that we struggle with a lot too. How to best connect these communities. I put on this slide that I personally use the Idea Farm Network listserv quite a bit. I find it really helpful for connecting with academic and stakeholder communities, particularly practitioners. But we are also going to work on a mechanism to connect you better based on what we've heard today. It's early days. We're doing our best. Don't be shy. And do your own Googling. Please don't just judge someone based on their title. So think broadly about expertise. For example, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign no longer has faculty focused on agroforestry and crop sciences, but that doesn't mean there's not a ton of people interested in agroforestry from other disciplines or even within the crop science disciplines, soil scientists, people thinking about water quality. There's lots of ways you can bring expertise to bear on a given agro-ecosystem. So think broadly and don't be shy reaching out to people. Spending, people wondering how to spend our money, and are there spending types that are not appropriate. We did not ask you for a budget justification in this narrative. We just asked you to go ahead and put money in boxes in the budget template. And then if we think your proposal looks like the most exciting, impactful one, then we'll reach out to you to talk about how you're spending that money and if it needs to be negotiated in any way. So please don't feel restricted on how you talk about the budget. Again, we want the ideas and the relationships to come through in the proposals. And then we had a question about who we're targeting, who's the demographics of interest in this work. Is it just college people? Is it just farm people? And I think the specific question was around young people. Is it okay if there's the next generation is involved? And that's a big yes. It's okay to have the next generation involved. In fact, I think that's the only way we're going to achieve some of the changes that we want to see. So please, again, be inclusive in your thinking about who you target. The clear thing is just to tell us in the narrative why you think it's important and how you think it'll move the needle. Those were some of the big things that we heard. We have a few minutes left, 9 minutes left, and I'd like to use this time to hear from you now, either in the chat or if you raise your hand. about burning issues, questions that you still need to see. Oh, and Tony reminds me that following this meeting, and Anya's going to talk about this in a minute, that following this, we will have follow-up mechanisms from this meeting. So watch your inbox for more, and of course, watch our website for updates. But now let's take these next few minutes to hear from you if there's burning things that need addressed.
In my first breakout group, we were talking about the IRAI like core priorities that you have for this program, and we wanted to know if you could kind of clarify a little bit more of what you're looking to what changes you're wanting to affect with your program, so that we as potential applicants can better discern whether the projects that fit well with our organization's priorities are a good match, so that we don't spend a lot of time, resources, and of yours and ours in submitting proposals that just really aren't a good fit.
That's a fantastic question, Molly. So thanks. I'll do my best, and we'll keep working towards a shared understanding. So with this amount of money, it's $150,000 this year, right? We are not trying to completely change the regenerative ag world with that kind of pot of money. What we are trying to do is get the University of Illinois to show up in a more meaningful way, to bring the full power of the student and the faculty and the extension and the teaching that we have at the university to bear on these regenerative ag projects. So the proposals that I would like to see submitted are ones that are going to help us unleash the power of the university to solve these problems in ways that we haven't been able to do before. So connecting and building that shared resource between the community and the university, so that together we can move the needle on regenerative ag is the primary emphasis or primary lens through which I view these proposals. Did that help or hurt your understanding?
Helped. Thank you.
I feel like there's no better resource that the university has than the minds that come to us each year, right? Our students are fantastic. And if we could all get them working on these issues, we'd have, well, we've already fed the world. Now we can do so much more, right? Okay, so one last question about how do we find the Google Doc to edit afterwards. So perhaps in the email that we send out to this group following this meeting, it'll have links to the Google Doc where you can find ways to continue this conversation after the meeting.
Thanks, Emily. So again, just a reminder to check back to the website for updates, and then of course answers to all of these questions that you've helped populate. And we'll be posting the slides as well as the Google breakouts document as well, so you'll have access to that. And we do plan to send out a list of all the participants that have been in this meeting to everyone. So if for any reason you would not like to be included in that list, please just let us know in the chat now or send us an email. And a big thanks to Fresh Taste and their partners for helping fund this and support the event. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us this afternoon. It's really great to see everyone, and we are so excited to see your proposals.